The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Jeffrey Epstein's death. Is the government withholding key evidence? We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It is what some people are calling, or they're calling it, the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crimebuster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. We're talking about Jeffrey Espstin. Epstein's in the news a lot these days. Just about every day you're reading some article about Epstein. And there's a renewed interest in the case. And some people are saying, hey, something's going on. The government's not releasing all of the information that some people say we were told would be released. And then you can't help but take a look now at how Jeffrey Espstin died. We're going to talk about that on today's program. But first, welcome to the podcast. If you're a new listener or a seasoned listener, we always invite you to reach out with a shout out. Reach me, Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. Hey, would you like to support those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger? Yep, we're talking about military, first responders, and, of course, law enforcement. If you'd like to be a part of a program of supporting those brave souls, then we encourage you to go to our sponsor, PeacemakerNetwork.com. You'll find all about it there. You can even become a part by becoming a badge supporter. Hey, we're going to leave the links in our show notes. Hey, before we get going, please hit like right there on your social platform. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Alrighty then, let's get into our main focus. You know, I can tell you something about his death, Jeffrey Epstein's death that is, that may interest you. Are you listening? It was death by appointment. Yeah, hang on before you think I'm losing my mind. There was an appointment that triggered Jeffrey Epstein's death. Now, we've already covered in the series how Epstein received a sweetheart deal here in Florida. That was 12 years ago or more. And that was regarding his abuse of underage girls. We told you about his stay in the Glamour Slammer. That was no more than a bad motel at night. Now, a lot of the local people were aware of this, and other people were aware of this, but most of the world was not aware of this Glamour Slammer treatment that he had. That is until President Donald Trump appointed Alexander Acosta as his Secretary of Labor. You see, my friend, that appointment piqued the interests of a lady by the name of Julie Brown. And who is Julie Brown? Julie Brown is an investigative reporter from the Miami Herald. She was made aware that Acosta, as a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, well, he was the one that agreed to that sweetheart deal. That included granting immunity from all federal criminal charges to Epstein, along with 4 named co-conspirators, and any potential co-conspirators that took part in that case. You see, that agreement, well, it just shut down the ongoing FBI probe into whether there were more victims and other powerful people who took part in Epstein's sex crimes. Well, at that time, that agreement halted the investigation, sealed the indictment. And we all know now that after Ghislaine Maxwell, after her prosecution, we know that the prosecutors there proved that Epstein continued to pursue his abuse long after that sweetheart plea deal with Acosta. So on November the 28th, 2018, rumors were already in the air that Acosta was now being considered as a possible successor to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. And during that time, that's when the Miami Herald published. They published an investigation that covered dozens and dozens of young women making charges against Epstein. She uncovered the Palm Beach police investigation in its details, and it included Acosta's role in the Epstein case. That story revealed the extent of collaboration between federal prosecutors and Epstein's attorneys in their own efforts to keep the real victims from learning about the plea deal. It actually included information about emails between Acosta and Epstein's attorneys promising to keep the deal from multiple victims of Epstein's abuse in Florida. So you see, my friend, if Acosta had not been appointed to this very public position, it may not have pinged the investigative reporter to dig into the case and publish it so the whole world would realize the injustice that occurred here in Florida. And those articles, well, talk about going viral. It was viral on, you talk about going viral. I mean, that went all over the world when those articles hit. You could say it was going viral on steroids. Those articles prompted the FBI to reopen the case. And so on July the 6th, 2014, Jeffrey Espstin left in his elite jet in the morning hours. He flew from Paris all the way to New Jersey in his own private plane that set down between 4 and 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in New Jersey, Teterboro Airport. But waiting for him, secretly waiting for him, were agents of the federal government, and they arrested him. They arrested him for solicitation, for child sex trafficking, and conspiracy to commit child sex trafficking. And this time, he wasn't taken to a glamour slammer, my friend, but to a real jail. A real jail that was cold, had vermin, improper staffing, equipment failures, and was known to many as a dungeon-type experience. In fact, someone said that his bathroom, the bathroom in the plane, was more than likely larger than the cell that he was placed in at the New York Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. And this was the very place that Jeffrey Espstin died, was unresponsive. But the question is, how did he die? Well, we're going to get to that in a moment, but right now it's time to take just a quick break and share with you our crazy crook story of the week. As we often say, you can't make it up. A young driver in a Honda Civic, well, he hit triple-digit speeds in a Florida highway. And he said he did it, get this, because he genuinely believed he was caught up in a race. Yep, a race, but not with another highway-dwelling motorist, but rather a race with a police officer. And this 25-year-old Florida man, well, he thought it was a good idea to take that little blue Honda Civic way up to felony speeds. And that was just recently. And this is according to police just down the road from me in Lake Mary, Florida. The young driver hit speeds of 120 miles per hour before finally coming to a stop. Now, thankfully, the Civic driver, well, he had the good sense not to run from the troopers. Got a bunch of troopers involved in that. First he was running from a police officer, now they're troopers. He did stop, but my friend, even when you stop, it doesn't really absolve you from doubling the speed limit. According to authorities, the driver said to the police, he said he hit those speeds because he believed that the officer that was first trying to pull him over was racing him. Seriously. Oh, my friend, you can't make it up. He thought the police officer was just trying to race him. So he thought he'd speed a little faster and faster and faster. And so they arrested him. Yep, arrested him for dangerous, excessive speeding. You see, my friend, here in Florida, there is a new state super speeder law. The law states that drivers will face criminal charges, even jail time, for exceeding the posted limit by 50 miles per hour or driving of speeds of over 100 miles per hour. In this case, he was reported guilty of both. Florida speed limits do not rise over 70 miles per hour, so hitting 120 miles per hour, well, it violated that 50 miles over that speed, even though he only admitted he was going 90 miles per hour. Hey, let me give you a Charlie warning. A Charlie warning to those of you who vacation here in Florida. You may think you only get a ticket, but here in Florida, if your speed exceeds dangerous limits, your ticket will be only a ticket to jail. That's right. So this idiot who thought that it would be cute to race a cop is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now back to our main focus. How did Jeffrey Espstin really die? Well, after his arrest this time, it was almost amusing to see all of those powerful, influential people who had associated themselves with Epstein, even after his earlier arrest back some years ago in Florida. Well, someone described it like turning on the light in a room and watching all the roaches run for cover. Suddenly, people who were associated with him began to distance themselves from previous association and from being pals with Epstein. All names from accusers of Epstein came pouring out. All kinds of names that were associated with him. Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, President Trump, Prince Andrews. Now, to be fair, our presidents, both Clinton and Trump, were acquainted with Epstein, but they have not been accused of any of the sexual abuse whatsoever, unlike some of the others. Clinton, of course, was a guest of Epstein on his plane several times, one a trip to Africa to help the poor people. Trump, he said that he even kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, and that he wasn't a fan. The question is, though, if all these people, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever political affiliation, however powerful and influential they are, if they knew about his work as a pedophile, of his own actions as a pedophile, why would they associate with him at all? That's why these young victims in Florida years and years ago felt totally abandoned by the government. Now, for all those who believe that Epstein was killed and did not commit suicide, there is a case to be made that there were people who did not want their own association to Epstein to be known, especially the fact that some believe that there were recordings and videos of some of these people, not all of them, but some of these people involved in criminal acts of their own with minor young women. And there are other powerful people who have been accused of sexual abuse, including Epstein's lawyer and Prince Andrew, even to the point that Prince Andrew, well, the royal family, they took him out, withdrew his duties as part of the royal court. Now let's talk about some of the things that are leading some people to think that he was murdered in his cell. His own lawyers, well, they believe that Epstein was looking forward to fighting the charges, not that he was depressed and wanted to die. They said he was arrogant. He thought he was above others. Thought he was smarter than other people, and that he thought he could buy his way out by getting the best legal advice and resources money could buy. They believed his own mental attitude was, I'm going to fight this thing, not I'm going to kill myself. They believed it to the point that they even suggested that Epstein's family hire another expert to attend the autopsy. And they did. They hired Dr. Michael Bodine, a renowned pathologist, to attend the autopsy. So they had the autopsy, and 6 days later, the state released the results of the autopsy. What do you think the state said? Well, you probably already know. The results from the state in the autopsy? Suicide by hanging. But wait a minute. There was another pathologist attending, Dr. Bodine. What did he say? Bodine states injuries to Epstein's neck was unusual for a suicidal hanging. So let's talk about those injuries. You see, when people die like this, there's usually what is called a ferrule around the neck. One kind of explained it like this. It's like here's a good illustration. If you were to take dental floss and wrap it around an apple tightly, it would leave a ferrule around the apple. Well, the ferrule around Epstein's neck was not the sharp V shape that usually takes as the noose tightens, but that ferrule was spread way wider and lower on the neck. That's more often seen in strangulations. There was also some damage to the throat and even a broken hyoid bone that Bodine said is rare in hangings. All of this adds on to the fact that some people believe that, well, if Epstein had these incriminating photos and videos of important, powerful people, which has not been proven, by the way, but has been alleged, there are people who would not want Epstein to trade off that information for his own freedom or for a lighter sentence. In other words, there are people saying there was plenty of motive to kill Epstein. It's like the old saying, dead men tell no tales. An example is the fact that Virginia Roberts, who was one of Epstein's earlier victims, she actually claimed that she was paid $15,000 from Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein to do for Prince Andrew what she did for Epstein. And she did so, she said 3 times, once in New York, once in London, and once in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Were there others who would want him dead? When the FBI raided Epstein's estates in Manhattan, they found troves of pictures of underage girls and diamonds. You know, you can use those to get a quick getaway when you can't get the cash. And there was a false passport. That false passport led back to a particular person that also had ties to another foreign government. And there were rumors then that Epstein may have been a spy for another country that was getting him to get blackmail information on powerful people of the world. Even his plane was known to have cameras and recorders. And a whole lot of important people flew on that plane, and a lot of underage girls flew on that plane, and there was a bedroom, of course. Now, all this sounds really, really juicy for conspiracy folks. But how would these people get access to kill him? And if so, who would it be? Well, immediately you think back to his first attempt at suicide, when at first he said that he was actually attacked by his cellmate. And his cellmate, he was a convicted cop gone bad, Nicholas Tartaglione, who had murdered other people. And he was considered a suspect by some that he had attacked Jeffrey Espstin there at his cell. But think with me. If Nicholas was trying to kill Epstein, why would he then alert guards and save his life? And I do know that you know, and most everybody knows, that there are people in jail who hate pedophiles, and that pedophiles are sometimes considered in danger when they go to jail. And there might be those people who would try to kill Epstein. I mean, he was a very, very high visible inmate. But if they were to do that, they would take pride in that. They would not hide the fact. They would shout it out proudly, and nobody has come forward to say anything like that. You see, my friend, I think it's time that we really talk about the real facts about the death of Jeffrey Espstin. Having served in law enforcement and leadership role, I know something about jails, and here's what I know. Epstein was facing real jail this time, and real jail is scary. In fact, most suicides in jails occurs in the first 30 days in jail, before people have had time to accept their fate and adjust to it. Did you hear that? Before they've had time to accept their fate and adjust to it. That's why jail correctional officers most often carry a special knife to cut down people who attempt to hang themselves. And we all know now that already Epstein had attempted suicide once. And often people who commit suicide have a couple of attempts before they do it. So I guess the real question is, why would they have taken him off a suicide watch? Why would they put him in a vulnerable spot where he could kill himself? That in itself is beyond amazing. As attorney William Barr said of this event, he said, quote, "It was a perfect storm of screw-ups within the system." And boy, was it. He was supposed to have a cellmate. In fact, there was a written directive that he should have a cellmate, but instead, that cellmate had been transferred out, and for that night, he was all alone in that jail cell. Barr says, perfect storm of screw-ups. The officers that were there were overworked. They had worked multiple shifts. They were tired. They fell asleep. They were supposed to make regular checks on him. They did not, and even falsified logs to suggest checks that were made was not, well, they suggested that they made the checks, but those checks proved that they were not made that night. And what's this with all those bed sheets in there that he could use to fashion together a noose? In fact, there were 2 nooses found in the cell. This suggests to me that he was going to try numerous times before he got it right and killed himself. Numerous times. Hey, couldn't that numerous times explain the damage to the cartridge and the broken bones in his throat? I believe, my friend, there was a reason why the mattress was on the floor. I don't think it was just that he wanted to sleep on the floor. I think he had it there so that he could land softly when he tried to kill himself. But the greatest evidence of all that he killed himself, and I agree with that official investigation, but the greatest evidence in my mind that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself is simply this. He finally realized he could not beat this rap. He could not beat this rap. He couldn't even get out on bail before his trial. You can imagine how that surprised him and his attorneys, that this, the richest man in the world, or among the richest people of the world, of all his millions of dollars, could not even convince the court to give him bail. You see, my friend, Jeffrey Espstin was a man who was always in control. He was in control of his life. He controlled others. Testimony from his staff, from the workers, the people that he abused, without a doubt proves that Jeffrey Espstin had to be in control. It was all about control. Control over money, even other people's money. When he was working as a financial consultant, he would have the people sign over the power of attorney to their whole estate. He controlled everything. And that was what's so amazing about how he made his money. He had control over young women. He had control over underage girls. He had control over his staff. All about control. Even with his first conviction, there was control. His lawyers controlled the sentence. They controlled work release for him in the daytime to his own plush offices. He controlled that his own food was brought in. He had a cell wing to himself. He controlled it. There was even protective bodyguards that he had and that he controlled, along with sheriff's deputies, listen to this, sheriff's deputies that he paid. Trips to his house while he was under this sentence, while in jail. Women brought in to see him in his office during his first glamour slammer existence. He controlled it. But wait a minute, now he's not in control. He does not have a say. He does not have a say when he gets up. He does not have a say when he eats. He does not have a say about what he eats. He does not have a say when he showers. He does not have a say when he moves about. He has lost control. And so what does he do? He takes back control. The very day before he kills himself, he has his lawyers redo his will and refile it. And he changes his will into a trust in the Virgin Islands. That move would make it most difficult for his victims to get to his money. He literally ties up his estate. He controls how they get access to his money. And then, well, the next step is easy. He gets that will taken care of. Just a day before this, he gets that will taken care of. He refiles it. So one of the last things he does with his attorneys, and then he controls what happens to himself. Not the courts. It's not the courts that controls it. It's not the judge that controls it. It's not the correctional officers that control it. It's not any one other person that controls what happens next in his life. He controls what happens next in his life. And so, my friend, when Jeffrey Epstein takes his own life, he literally says to the world, screw you. I'm going out my way. I'm doing it the way I want it to be done. Nobody controls me. To authorities, to us, the public, and especially to his victims, his action says, screw you. Then Jeffrey Epstein kills himself. Well, there you have it, my friend. That's what I believe about the death of Jeffrey Epstein. I do not believe that the government is hiding any evidence regarding his death. Now, there are some information that I still have question about why the government is not releasing that information. But it has nothing to do with his death. Nothing to do with his death. But only about some of the things that he was involved in regarding perhaps other countries, maybe even our allies, or maybe even our government. Remember, as we said in the session some time ago, Acosta was reportedly saying to one person, at least somebody in the subcommittee, that the reason he signed off on that sweetheart deal was that he was told that Epstein was intelligence that was above his pay grade. That's the kind of stuff that the government may be hiding. But I don't believe the government's hiding anything about his death. I think his death was the last step that Epstein did to take control himself of how he dies. Well, that's what I think based on my experience as an investigator. But what do you think? Do you think that there was more to it? Love to hear from you. Reach me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And until this time next time, when we'll begin to tell you even more about this crazy, crazy story about this pedophile, the most infamous pedophile in American history. Until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert, for the life you save may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional information and podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.